I'm Emily. When I was 7, my biological father passed away suddenly from a heart attack on a Saturday morning. I remember he was making pancakes, a weekend tradition that always brought joy to our little family. Dad loved to shape the pancakes into funny faces to make me laugh. As I ran into the kitchen to help, he suddenly collapsed, clutching his chest with a look of excruciating pain. The rest of that day is a blur. The sound of ambulance sirens, the stark walls of the hospital, and my mother's tears. In the blink of an eye, we lost the anchor of our family. Not long after, my mom met David in a support group for widowed parents. David was tall, kind, and had a warm smile that faintly reminded me of Dad. A year later, they got married, and David moved into the old house my dad had left us. As I adjusted to having a stepfather, my mom shared some news that would change everything. She was pregnant. I can still see her glowing face as she told me I was going to be a big sister. At age 9, Ethan, my half-brother, was born, and from that moment, everything in our home shifted. My mom, once a devoted elementary school teacher, decided to quit her job to care for Ethan full-time. "Ethan needs me," she would say whenever someone questioned her decision. I often wondered if I hadn't needed her just as much during my early years, but the words always caught in my throat. Instead, I watched silently as my mom's world became centered entirely around Ethan. I started noticing how little attention she paid to me. She'd forget to pack my lunch for school and act surprised when I mentioned being hungry at dinner. "I'm so sorry, honey," she'd say distractedly, her eyes already back on Ethan. I was busy with Ethan's doctor appointments all day. Moments like these became the norm. David, my stepdad, noticed. I often saw him watching Mom with a thoughtful expression as she hovered over Ethan, seemingly unaware of my presence. One evening, while I was struggling with my homework at the kitchen table, David sat beside me and helped me with a tricky math problem. "Emily," he said in his calm, gentle voice, "sometimes people get so focused on one thing that they forget about other important things." I knew he was talking about Mom, and though his words couldn't change the situation, his kindness became a source of quiet comfort for me during those years. Ethan's arrival transformed my life. My mom, who once cared deeply about every detail of my world, was now entirely consumed by my little brother. I became invisible in my own home, left to manage my own needs. Every day I made my own breakfast, packed my own lunch, and completed my homework without anyone noticing or asking how my day went. "Emily, you're the older sister," Mom would remind me. "You need to understand and help out." I would nod and swallow my feelings of neglect, unsure of how to voice them. Each night I hoped for a moment to sit with Mom and share my day. But after putting Ethan to bed, she was always too exhausted. "We'll talk tomorrow, Emily," she'd say, patting my shoulder. But tomorrow never came. Over time, my stories faded and I learned to stay silent. When I needed someone to listen, I turned to David. He always made time for me and encouraged me to keep going, though even he couldn't change the way Mom prioritized Ethan over me. As the years passed, the responsibilities piled up. If the house was messy after a long day of Mom tending to Ethan, it was my job to clean. If Ethan's toys were scattered everywhere, I was asked to pick them up. "Emily, help your mother out," was a constant refrain. I loved my brother, but watching Mom light up when Ethan said a new word, or hearing her gush about him to her friends, made me wonder if she'd ever felt that proud of me. As my brother and I were growing up, my mom turned to Aiden and asked if he knew if anyone could help out. I gradually became quieter, more withdrawn. Even when I scored top marks on a test or won an award at school, Mom's response was lukewarm at best. "Good job, Emily," she'd say, before rushing off to take Ethan to another doctor's appointment. I realized, no matter how hard I tried, I could never compete with the special place Ethan held in her heart. I found solace in small joys and David's support. He would take me to karate class twice a week, cheering me on from the stands as if he were my real dad. Those moments were a rare source of light in my otherwise lonely world. But even David's warmth couldn't fill the void left by my mother's indifference. Looking back, those years were marked by a growing sense of isolation. I felt like a shadow in my own family, struggling to understand why I had been sidelined in favor of my little brother. Despite everything, I loved Ethan, but the pain of feeling unseen and unvalued by my mom left a lasting scar that shaped the person I would become. Tommy, my younger brother, seemed to be wrapped in an impenetrable cocoon of my mother's constant attention. From the time he was little, she was always by his side, meticulously overseeing every aspect of his life. She wouldn't let Tommy do anything on his own. When he started kindergarten, I remember my mom spending hours inspecting every tiny detail of his backpack. From the perfectly sharpened crayons to the homemade snacks she carefully packed. "Tommy needs everything to be perfect," she would say, as though one small oversight could ruin his entire day. Meanwhile, if I ever forgot my lunch at home, it was brushed off as a small mistake you need to take responsibility for. As time went on, her overprotectiveness of Tommy became more apparent. By the time he was 7, she insisted he shouldn't have to clean his own room. "Tommy's still young, help him out a bit, Emily," she'd say. At 12 it became routine. I was the one taking on his responsibilities, while Tommy played video games or watched cartoons. Once, when I finally protested, "Mom, why can't Tommy do it himself? I'm busy too," she gave me a look of reproach. "Tommy needs time to develop his creativity. You're his big sister, you should understand." It didn't stop at cleaning or chores. My mom shielded Tommy from the consequences of his mistakes. One time, he accidentally broke Grandma's favorite porcelain vase. I braced myself, expecting Mom to be upset, but instead, she hugged him tightly and said, "It's okay, Tommy, it's just an old vase." When I tried to remind Tommy to be more careful, Mom shot me a sharp glance. "Emily, don't make him feel guilty. You need to learn to be more understanding." Even when others, including David, my stepdad, suggested that Tommy should start learning independence, Mom was quick to shut them down. "He's still a child. None of you understand how sensitive my son is," she declared during a dinner conversation when David gently proposed enrolling Tommy in a baseball league. Mom was adamant that sports were too dangerous and insisted Tommy wasn't suited for such activities. Instead, she signed him up for art classes at a local community center. I still remember the bored expression on Tommy's face as he sat in the class, doodling aimlessly. After only a few sessions he dropped out, and Mom was quick to blame the teacher for not understanding his artistic spirit. I lost count of how many times David tried to reason with her, urging her to let Tommy experience life and take on responsibilities. "Sarah, he's 8 now," David said one evening. "I think it's time he started making his own bed in the mornings. It'll be good for him to learn some independence." But Mom immediately slammed her fork down, her face flushed with anger. "Are you saying I'm a bad mother?" she snapped, her voice rising to drown out any explanation he might offer. David remained calm. "No, Sarah, that's not what I'm saying. I just think Tommy needs to start taking responsibility for himself. I only want what's best for him." But Mom wouldn't listen. Instead, she turned to me, her voice laced with accusation. "Emily, you see what I have to deal with? Your stepfather is always so critical. You were cared for just like Tommy when you were his age." I lowered my gaze, unwilling to argue, knowing that any attempt to speak up would make me her next target. David didn't give up easily. He often suggested activities that would help Tommy build independence and social skills. Once he proposed sending Tommy to a summer sports camp where he could learn teamwork and resilience. "Sarah, I think this would be a great opportunity for him," David said hopefully. But Mom dismissed the idea immediately. "A summer camp? Are you kidding? Do you know how dangerous those places are? Tommy can't be away from me. Who else would understand him like I do?" Every discussion ended the same way, with David sighing in frustration, and Mom retreating further into the bubble she had built around Tommy. David tried to bond with Tommy in his own way, taking him on fishing trips or short outdoor excursions. But whenever Mom found out, she would make things difficult. "Tommy doesn't need that, David," she'd say dismissively, as if his efforts were meaningless. Over time, I began to notice the weary look in David's eyes. A quiet resignation that hinted at his frustration. He stopped trying to argue with Mom and instead redirected his attention to me, perhaps realizing that I was the one in the family who needed it most. David became my quiet anchor, He drove me to karate classes, stayed to watch every session, and listened intently as I described the moves I had learned. But even as he supported me, there was a sadness in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of his inability to change the dynamic of our family. I appreciated his efforts deeply, knowing that he was doing everything he could to make me feel valued in a home where I often felt invisible. Looking back, I can see how David's quiet resilience and care were the only sources of light in an otherwise isolating environment. His small acts of kindness stood in stark contrast to the overwhelming attention Tommy received, and though they couldn't completely fill the void left by my mom's neglect, they reminded me that someone still saw and valued me for who I was. After David passed away from a sudden heart attack when I was 24, our family's life quickly spiraled into chaos. My mom, who had always relied on David for both financial and emotional support, was left feeling lost and terrified at the prospect of having to shoulder all the responsibilities on her own. A few weeks after the funeral, she called me, her voice heavy with anxiety. "Emily, I don't know what to do. Without David, I can't manage. Ethan and Candy need help. You understand our family's situation, don't you?" I sat quietly in the small chair in my apartment, feeling my heart tighten as her words sank in. I knew that if I refused, she would bombard me with guilt and lectures about my duty to the family. But I also knew that taking on this burden would put significant strain on my own finances. After a long pause, I sighed softly. "How much help are you asking for, Mom?" She hesitated, then said, $1,200 a month, Emily. Just until we get back on our feet. Don't you?" The amount left me speechless. It was a substantial sum, nearly a third of my monthly salary, but I nodded anyway. "All right, Mom, I'll do my best." At first, I reassured myself that it was the right thing to do, but as the months went by, and I saw the deductions leaving my account each month, the weight of it all began to sink in. I started cutting back on my own expenses. No more dinners out with friends, no more weekend trips I had dreamed of taking. Mom either didn't notice or didn't care about the sacrifices I was making. Instead, every phone call revolved around new demands. "Emily, Ethan needs a new computer to learn programming," or "Candy wants to celebrate her birthday at a restaurant, can you chip in?" I tried to endure it. But every time I went back home to visit, the resentment in my heart grew. Ethan, now 19 years old, wasn't working or studying. He spent his days in his room playing video games. Candy, my brother's fiancée, was sprawled out on the couch, snacking and watching TV all day. The house, once meticulously maintained by David, had fallen into disarray and neglect. When I asked Mom why Ethan couldn't find a job to help out, she snapped at me, "You don't understand your brother like I do. Ethan is very sensitive. The world out there isn't safe for him." Watching her coddle Ethan and Candy at all costs left me feeling bitter. I was the only one contributing financially, yet I was treated like an outsider. Still, out of love and compassion for my mom, I kept sending the money, hoping that one day things would improve. But deep down, a question began to gnaw at me. Does anyone in this family ever stop to think about how I feel? One summer afternoon, I returned home at my mother's request. She said she had something important to discuss, and I, still holding on to a faint hope that things might change, agreed to visit. As I stepped into the old house that used to be my haven, I realized just how much everything had changed. Ethan was in his usual spot, glued to his computer screen, while Candy lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone and chewing gum. My mom sat in the living room, holding a stack of papers. "Emily, I need to tell you something," she began, her tone a mix of unease and determination. I sat down, listening as she explained that she had drawn up a will, leaving the house and all the family assets to Ethan. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, I'm the one who's been supporting you all this time. I've been paying for the electricity, the house repairs, everything. Ethan doesn't even have a job. Why would you do this?" She looked at me, her gaze colder than I had ever seen it. "Emily, Ethan needs this house. He's the son, the one who needs to inherit the family's legacy. You're already stable, you don't need as much as he does." Her words felt like a dagger to my heart. But what she said next utterly shattered me. To be honest, I've never loved you the way I love Ethan. From the moment he was born, I knew he was special. He's the light of my life. And you've always been a good child, but never anything extraordinary. I sat there, frozen, a storm of pain, humiliation, and anger raging inside me. All the years I had spent helping her, the sacrifices I made with my finances, my time, and my dreams, were dismissed with that cruel admission. I stood up, looked at her, and forced myself to speak with a steady voice. Thank you for your honesty. But from now on, I won't be sending you any more money. Ethan and Candy can take care of you since they're the ones you truly care about. Her mouth opened, as if to protest, but I didn't wait to hear her reply. I walked out of the house, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Complete freedom. On the drive home, her words echoed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. But at the same time, they brought clarity. I didn't owe her or Ethan anything. The very next day, I canceled all the automatic transfers I had set up to support her. I blocked her number, along with Ethan's and Candy's. In the weeks that followed, my mom tried every way possible to reach me, through Facebook, email, even my coworkers. But I refused to respond. I was done chasing love from someone who had never valued me. Now, I devote all my time and money to building my own future. I've started looking for a small house where I can finally feel happy and free. Looking back, I have no regrets about my decision. I lost my mom a long time ago, on the day she decided to pour all her love and expectations into Ethan. But now, I've finally found myself again. After cutting off all contact with my mom and Ethan, I began to feel a sense of relief I had never experienced before. The $1,200 I used to send home each month now became the foundation of my dream. A small house I could call my own. I opened a new savings account, and every month, instead of sending money away without any gratitude in return, I deposited the full amount into this account. For the first time, I felt like I was truly in control of my life. The early days after that decision were not easy. There were nights I lay in bed, heavy with guilt, wondering if I was too cruel for leaving my mother in a difficult situation. But then I would remember her cold eyes, her cutting words that I was never special, and the painful truth that she had never truly valued me. Those memories kept me grounded, reminding me that I had made the right choice. Instead of dwelling on what I had lost, I focused on the future. I began making detailed plans for my dream home. A cozy living room, a fully equipped kitchen, and a small balcony where I could sip coffee in the mornings. I spent my weekends touring properties in the suburbs, quiet neighborhoods not too far from work, but peaceful enough to feel like a saint. Through this process, I realized that saving money wasn't just about building financial security, it was about rebuilding trust in myself. I had spent too long living in the shadow of a family that dismissed all my efforts. Now, I wasn't just saving for a house, I was investing in myself. I enrolled in personal development courses, signed up for a weekend yoga class, and even treated myself to a short trip to the coast. Something I had never dared to do before. By October that year, with my savings finally reaching a significant amount, I found the perfect little house in the suburbs. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but it felt like home the moment I walked through the door. The creaky wooden floors, the small but cozy kitchen, and the backyard where I could plant flowers or simply sit and read. It all felt like a fresh start. On the day I signed the papers, I couldn't stop smiling. This house wasn't just a property. It was a symbol of the freedom and independence I had reclaimed after years of being under someone else's control. Every morning in my new home, I wake up to sunlight streaming through the curtains and a deep sense of peace in my chest. No more guilt-ridden phone calls, no more financial burdens weighing me down. For the first time, I'm living for myself. And more than just living, I'm finally experiencing the true meaning of happiness. After cutting off all contact with my mother and Ethan, I began to feel a sense of relief I had never experienced before. The $1,200 I used to send home every month became the foundation of my dream. A small house I could finally call my own. I opened a new savings account, and instead of sending money away without ever receiving gratitude, I deposited the entire amount into that account every month. For the first time, I felt like I truly had control over my life. The first days after making that decision weren't easy. There were nights I lay in bed, heavy with guilt, wondering if I was being too cruel for leaving my mother in a difficult situation. But then I would recall her cold eyes, her harsh words telling me I was never special, and the undeniable truth that she had never truly valued me. Those memories gave me strength, reminding me that I had made the right choice. Rather than dwelling on what I had lost, I focused on the future. I began planning every detail of my dream home, a small house with a cozy living room, a fully equipped kitchen, and a little balcony where I could sip my morning coffee. On weekends, I spent time touring properties in suburban neighborhoods. Quiet, not too far from work, but far enough to provide a sense of peace. I frequently saw Jo tucking at her dog. Throughout this process, I realized that saving wasn't just about accumulating money, it was about rebuilding trust in myself. I had spent too long living in the shadow of a family that dismissed all my efforts. Now, I wasn't just saving for a house, I was investing in myself. I took skill development courses, signed up for a weekend yoga class, and even treated myself to a short trip to the beach. Something I had never dared to do before. By October of that year, when my savings had grown significantly, I found a perfect little house in the suburbs. It wasn't large or luxurious, but the moment I stepped through the door, it felt like home. The old wooden floors, the small but cozy kitchen, and the backyard where I could plant flowers or simply sit and read, it was everything I needed. The day I signed the contract, I couldn't stop smiling. This house wasn't just a piece of property, it was a symbol of the freedom and independence I had reclaimed after years of being controlled. Every morning in my new home, I wake up to sunlight streaming through the curtains, filling me with a sense of peace and freedom. There are no more guilt-ridden phone calls, no more financial burdens weighing on my shoulders. For the first time, I'm living for myself. And more than just living, I'm finally experiencing what true happiness feels like. The story follows Lily's journey from being a forgotten and exploited child within her family to finding the strength to stand up for herself, sever toxic relationships, and build an independent, free life. It highlights the importance of self-respect, setting boundaries, and refusing to be taken advantage of by those who do not value her.